anyone who falls through the gap because a social program does not protect them. Importantly, around the environmental agenda, life below water and climate action and sustainable communities, in about 4 days, St. Kitts and Nevis would officially ban single-use plastics here. We are making these serious commitments not just to our regional and international agenda, but a recognition that if we are to become a sustainable island state, then our small island must do its part to protect our environment and to transition our economy. So mainly the reason why I'm not able to join you in Nigeria, but hopefully I would get an opportunity to do so. The ministry is leading a series of national conversations with stakeholders, with everyone from the restaurant industry, the hotel industry, our bakers, our supermarket owners, our small community shops, to ensure that the transition happens equitably, that no one has any undue stress in terms of accessing the resources to transition. And much of this required face-to-face conversation to engage, to understand their challenges and their burdens. But we are making single-use plastics a thing of the past here in St. Kitts and Nevis. And finally, with the peace, justice, and strong institutions, when we assumed the government of St. Kitts and Nevis, or the administration, in 2022, we made a serious commitment to the good governance agenda, and part of it was having strong supportive legislation and policy frameworks that allowed for equity, inclusivity, and protection, not just of people, but planet. And just last week, we passed the Plastic Waste Reduction Bill, which was supported by both sides of our government, another clear indication of good governance being being an ambition, not just of the government, but of the opposition. Of course, if we are to make St. Kitts and Nevis a sustainable island state, we have to use every opportunity to promote our own sustainability agenda, to share experiences and share knowledge with other island nations. And as such, we are hosting the Global Sustainable Island Summit in St. Kitts and Nevis, May 27th to 29th. We have invited island nations from across the world to convene on our island to share their own innovation, their experiences, their best practices, and to have serious technical and practical conversations about investment. The summit also includes a geothermal summit on Nevis, which will be hosted by the Honorable Premier and jointly by the Minister of Energy, another indication of partnerships for sustainable development. And we are showcasing to the world what investments in geothermal can do, not just for our islands, but also for connectivity across the Eastern Caribbean. Our next steps towards 2040, as I wrap my presentation, is to ensure that we can mobilize resources for climate adaptation and for resilience. It means that we have to raise visibility of St. Kitts and Nevis and our own national vision. As such, this presentation here at the Afri-Carribean Investment Summit is so critical. The opportunity to occupy some space, to share what our ambitions are and how we intend to do this collectively with global partnership has been truly an honor, not just for me and my ministry, but I'm certain for the entire government. Now, CISA for us serves as a communication and public relations engine for our sustainability effort. We want, when people think of St. Kitts and Nevis, they think of sustainability and sustainable island state agenda, not just for us, but the fact that this can be a model that can be replicated across the region and across island nations in the Pacific, in Europe, etc. We intend to align all of our existing projects under the banner of Sustainable Island State, and this has been an active engagement, not just with government and parliamentarians, but with our technocrats, with our regional partners, and of course, as granular as with our budgeting process, where every permanent secretary who presents to our government or cabinet, rather, their intentions for their budgeting year presents it along the lines of investments in sustainability, climate adaptation, and resilience. Ensure that it deals with climate adaptation, sustainability, and resilience. Thank you so much.
So, in simple terms, Your Excellencies, very distinguished ladies and gentlemen, investing in agriculture at St. Kitts and Nevis offers so many benefits like reduced import dependence, increased local food production, and opportunities for sustainable farming, agrotourism, and economic diversification. And of course, the government of St. Kitts and Nevis will give you all the necessary supports. Please, let's give her another resounding applause for that wonderful and scintillating presentation. Thank you very much. Like we told you from the outset, we want to make it as business-like as possible, and so straight to the next item on our agenda. At this point in time, it will be my pleasure to be inviting His Excellency Calvin St. Just, the Chairman, Citizenship by Investment of St. Kitts and Nevis. His Excellency Calvin St. Just is the Executive Chairman of the Board of Governors of St. Kitts and Nevis Citizenship by Investment Unit, and served previously as the country's Honorary Special Envoy for Investment Development and International Business Relations. A seasoned Wall Street executive with over 25 years of experience. He has held leadership roles at Morgan Stanley, JP Morgan, and T. Rowe Price, specializing in wealth management, cybersecurity, fintech, and global strategy. Formerly, he is a global chief operations officer at Morgan Stanley Financial Wellness in wealth management. He built teams serving Fortune 100 companies and led initiatives in fraud prevention and AI-driven risk management. As a central banker and Lean Six Sigma Black Belt, he excels in financial innovation, governance, and process optimization. He also serves on multiple global boards, including the Stevens Business School Advisory Board and a $1 billion plus US dollar credit union, a Stevie Award winner on global customer service. Very distinguished ladies and gentlemen, let us please now at this point watch a short video that will play on Citizenship by Investment. If you're ready with it, the media team, please let's have it.
What is a citizen? We say that we're in the business of citizenship, but we know we are much more than that. Because citizens are family, they're business owners, they're blue sky dreamers. Citizens are adventurers, or those searching for security. Citizens aspire, they have ambitions, they want to travel and experience and thrive. Citizens are people, and so we work with people, with our heads and hearts, with determination, a sense of innovation, and a commitment to exceptional delivery. As partners to accomplish discerning individuals looking for second citizenship. St. Kitts and Nevis program has been a global success story since 1984, which makes us the pioneers, the visionaries who can point towards new horizons, the quiet, confident leaders that can always be trusted. It's a role we have taken over for more than 40 years. And we plan to be doing what we do for many more years to come. Offering citizenship for people, St. Kitts and Nevis Citizenship by Investment. The first, the finest.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I've traveled to 20 plus cities, 3 continents, and met over 600 plus business agents in the last 6 months. And I can tell you, being here is such a joy to follow the same concept and said, I feel at home. So thank you. So permit me to adopt the protocol that has been graciously established. I would like to begin by acknowledging our esteemed hosts, the honorable members of the Nigerian federal government, the Honorable Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis, Dr. Terence Chu, the Honorable Premier of our sister island, Nevis, Minister Premier Mark Brantley, the Honorable Minister of Agriculture, Creative Economy, Small Business, the Honorable Sanal Duggins, Honorable Ministers, distinguished guests, investors, friends, Kittitians, and Nevisians here. It gives me great pleasure to speak to you today about our citizenship by investment, but most importantly, investment. This is the most important aspect, and I'm so proud to be here as a Kittitian, but most importantly, a citizen of the world, to bring to you a piece of the magic of St. Kitts and Nevis. You may have heard St. Kitts and Nevis is here to engage with government and business leaders here in Nigeria. What we've recognized the summit is a unique platform to showcase our credible and bankable investment opportunities that are market ready for investment engagement. We hope to foster close ties, firm collaboration, and solid partnership through the investment opportunities that we're here to present. So the highlights I will speak to you this morning includes our citizenship by investment, development potential in real estate and other development projects, including the construction of smart homes. And I will touch on tourism, and I will try my best to also touch on agriculture, but you have heard by the esteemed minister who is an expert in the area of agriculture, so I'll do my utmost best. As chairman of the recently transformed Citizenship by Investment Unit, it is my mission to show you the opportunities that await you, the vision that is possible, and a holistic solution that we provide. Although always close to my Kittitian and Nevisian roots, I've lived in the US as a banker on Wall Street for the past 2 decades. And I've been privy to discussions at the boardroom tables, and I'm aware of the pain points of successful entrepreneurs and investors. So when the Prime Minister approached me to come on board as the chairman for the newly established statutory body, it was an obvious choice because I could see how St. Kitts and Nevis, our Citizenship by Investment program, can truly be a tool for such a powerful global apparatus for business individual, for diversification, for expansion, and for flourish. And as the Prime Minister alluded yesterday, citizenship by investment can be a diplomatic tool, not just for capital, but for conscience. So many of you may be aware of the impressive legacy, as you would have seen, around being the first, a tiny island like St. Kitts and Nevis, being the first in the Citizenship by Investment program. But not only being the first, but we have stood the test of time. We've also been an integral bridge connecting St. Kitts and Nevis, this tiny little island, and its economic opportunities to the citizens of the world. So although we may be small, or the smallest country in the Western Hemisphere, we have a punch above our weight as the longest running premier CBI program in the world, ranking as the best CBI program for years. Most significantly, we have become a second home to many Nigerian business persons and families, with our vision aligning so neatly with our objective of the Afri-Carribean Investment Summit. This is the ideal platform as a strategic gateway for fostering dialogue and collaboration. And we're here to build on the strong relationship with our fellow Nigerian friends. The benefits are simple that our Citizenship by Investment program offer. We have visa-free access or visa upon arrival to 157 countries around the world, including access to the EU, Schengen zone, the UK, Singapore, and Hong Kong. We offer those investors who are seeking that wealth diversification or tax optimization the opportunity with our tax-neutral jurisdiction, with no personal income tax, no wealth tax, and of course, as part of generational wealth, we do not have inheritance tax. We offer a fast and processing process in terms of what we do for our citizenship process. And our program, as I said, has been tested and tried. As many of you may have been aware, in the US, they've recently also launched a new citizenship program, which tells us what we're doing and what we have been doing for 40 years. This tiny island is now being seen as an investment tool that can transform nations. Citizenship by Investment has been a pivotal investment arm. It drives our sustainable development in our country. With our recent transformation, we intend to further evolve the program by attracting and supporting discerning investors and developers to join our program. And Nigeria is a valued partner on this journey. For our Nigerian investors, this offers an exciting opportunity to be part of something great, an opportunity to contribute to the sustainable development in a growing and dynamic region, as you would have heard, while securing a tangible benefit for your own businesses. Here's how Nigerian investors can leverage our sustainable island state agenda through our CBI program. We believe in strategic investment. So our products that we develop, they ensure that investors can be part of the sustainable island state agenda, as you would have heard by Minister Clark. And they're committed to supporting the sustainable initiative, eco-friendly tourism, and sustainable agriculture, as you would have heard earlier. Another key area is real estate development. With the growing demand for infrastructure, development, and real estate projects, the Citizenship by Investment program, it offers opportunities to invest in approved real estate development. It contributes to the modernization and expansion of St. Kitts and Nevis. Investors are also welcome to invest as developers to become in approved developments. The opportunity to deliver smart homes is open for exploring. Smart homes for us means bringing new advanced digital technology of building luxury homes that allows savvy investors to monitor your home in any part of the globe. So I want you to imagine your home in St. Kitts, and you're able to switch on the lights. You can put the water tank on before you take off from Abidjan in anticipation of your arrival. This housing development sector, it's truly a huge investment opportunity where we know our Nigerian investors with expertise in real estate can make significant contribution while also benefiting from the return on investment and the added advantage of citizenship. We have a public benefit option route that also provides a development opportunity. It contributes to the advancement of our nation, and it aims at improving our public services, such as healthcare, our education, and infrastructure. We know investors are passionate about giving back, and so we wanted to offer this opportunity. You would have heard we are an integral part in terms of our location from a tourism perspective. Our country derives significant revenue and participation from tourism. We're known as one of the most beautiful tourism destinations and still an unspoiled region. St. Kitts and Nevis is a second home to many, many famous people. Our hospitality is second to none in making our visitors feel at home. Our tourism is growing, and St. Kitts has a lot to offer. So, why not come and make the next Nollywood, as the Prime Minister said, in St. Kitts and Nevis? As a country, we're gearing up for this sector. And we would love Nollywood to be part of this journey. The myriad of landscape opportunities from mountainous forests and sandy beaches running through the turquoise sea are stunning. We're building a world-class, state-of-the-art, creative arts center that will facilitate this cultural exchange program for our creatives and for our youths. We want to foster this great cultural and economic exchange with our brothers and sisters. And this is important for us. We want to ensure that we offer you the opportunity in many different ways to invest. You've heard from our Minister of Agriculture. The opportunity is phenomenal in terms of what we offer from an agro perspective. St. Kitts and Nevis CBI gives you the opportunity to invest in St. Kitts, whether it's approved real estate, development, manufacturing. We offer this, and the returns are phenomenal. You would have heard in terms of being an investor and having the opportunity to support the growth of your business. So I want to ensure that I'm not remiss within telling you the vision of our sustainable growth. St. Kitts and Nevis Citizenship by Investment Program, it provides our Nigerian investors the opportunity to expand your business. We are looking forward to participating in public-private partnership. We have a number of those opportunities with the investment. We are also ensuring that we can demonstrate strategic partnership with the government and offering different ways and opportunities. Our citizenship program is the hub of investment in giving you the return, whether it's a boutique hotel, a resort. These are the areas that we can contribute with a significant return that gives you mobility across the globe, security in this wonderful place that we call home, St. Kitts and Nevis. So thank you.
Please, one more time, a round of applause for him. I'm very certain that I'm not the only one that since this summit started, I've just been feeling like traveling. Am I the only one? There's just something, you just want to be on a beach, right? Coupled with our son. Anyway, that's a discussion for another day. So very randomly, I just asked ChatGPT. I said, give me an ideal day in the life of a St. Kitts and Nevis citizen. Do you want to hear what it says? It says, imagine waking up in your smart home. Remember he mentioned smart homes. Where your blinds automatically opens and there's a palm tree right beside you. You are open to a bright Caribbean sunrise and your coffee maker starts brewing your morning coffee for you. You check your home security, walking out, knowing that you are going to contribute to a growing economy. And when you're done with a long day at work, you return back with a splash of crystal waters and join a party in the island. Is that true? Please, a round of applause for St. Kitts and Nevis. At least one of them has to be true. Either coconut water or the islands or the party. Oh, it's all true. I need to relocate. All right, we're moving very briskly. So today is taking a slightly different turn from yesterday. As you can see, there are lots of conversations because I know we have a lot to talk about. We're not here to just... Yesterday, I was saying we need to make more action. We can do all the talking and put everything down on paper, but we need to talk more sustainable and how we can move forward in the right direction to see that this partnership becomes a reality. So that's why we're having a lot of conversations, presentations, and panels. So I want you to be very present. Please look at the person beside you. Tell them, be present. Say it again. Say, be present. A lot of us were on our phones. I'm hoping that we're taking notes on our phones, and that's why we're on our phones so much. All right, we're moving on to the next activity, and we're going to be talking about overcoming barriers to African-Caribbean trade and investments. Taking this was supposed to be Mr. Abba Bello, the Managing Director, Nigerian Export-Import Bank, but he is going to be represented by Mr. Mohammed Awami, the Head Specialized Business Nigerian Export-Import Bank. Ladies and gentlemen, please can we put our hands together for him as we talk about overcoming barriers to African-Caribbean trade and investment. Well, he's not up yet. Please can we keep clapping till he comes? Thank you.
Your Excellencies, Prime Minister, Premier, Honorable Minister, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, please permit me to adopt the already well-established protocols. My name is Mohammed Awami. I head the Specialized Business Department at the Nigerian Export-Import Bank, NEXIM. I'm here representing the Managing Director and CEO, Mr. Abba Bello, who was eager to be here, but unfortunately was indisposed and couldn't make it. He has therefore asked me to represent him and present his paper titled Overcoming Barriers to Afri-Carribean Trade and Investment. It is therefore my honor to make this presentation on his behalf. I am pleased to be here this morning, and I feel greatly honored by the opportunity to share my thoughts with this august gathering on the important topic of overcoming trade barriers between Africa and the Caribbean. My presentation is structured into two parts, starting with the background, which provides the context, and I would then highlight the key issues that characterize our trade relations before proceeding with some suggestions for improvement. By way of background, Africa and the Caribbean share deep historical, cultural, and political ties rooted in centuries of shared experience of colonialism, displacement, and resilience. Now, despite these strong linkages, trade and economic cooperation between the two regions remain minimal. The untapped potential of Afri-Caribbean trade will significantly contribute to economic diversification, job creation, and sustainable development for both regions. Bridging this gap requires targeted policy reforms, infrastructure development, private sector engagement, and cultural and diplomatic reconnections. In the next few minutes, I'll be drawing your attention to some of the existing challenges hindering trade between Africa and the Caribbean and outline strategic pathways for strengthening commercial, investment, and institutional ties, with significant focus on historical ties, contemporary geopolitical shifts, and growing South-South cooperation. I'll be making a case for a new era of Afri-Caribbean trade engagement. Historical linkages. Africa and the Caribbean are bound by centuries of old historical connections. The transatlantic slave trade, colonial rule, and the struggles for independence created an enduring socio-cultural ties. African heritage remains a powerful cultural identity symbol across the Caribbean, reflected in language, religion, music, cuisine, and customs. These shared experiences have laid the foundation for political solidarity and cultural diplomacy, but economic relations have not followed the same trajectory. While both regions have collaborated in multilateral platforms such as the AU, the CARICOM, the Commonwealth, and the non-aligned movement, intra-regional trade and investment flow remains negligible. The absence of robust economic engagement stands in contrast to the common aspirations of economic independence, resilience, and development. Leveraging shared heritage can therefore form a solid basis for a renewed economic partnership. The trade volumes between Africa and the Caribbean remain significantly low, estimated at about 730 million and less than 1% of total trade of both regions. Trade is mostly indirect, routed through third-party countries in Europe, North America. For instance, goods from Ghana or Nigeria may reach Jamaica or Trinidad via ports in Rotterdam or in Miami, with increased costs and delays. In terms of trade composition, Africa exports crude oil, fertilizers, solid minerals, while the Caribbean exports rum, spices, pharmaceuticals. In general, however, trade between the regions lacks systemic market development or logistic coordination. Investment flows are equally modest. Few African companies have presence in the Caribbean, and vice versa. Most investments in both regions still come from traditional partners in Europe, North America, and increasingly China. Structural and policy barriers. Now, infrastructure and connectivity is an issue, the lack of direct shipping and air connectivity, absence of trade agreements, limited information flows, and different regulatory standards all contribute to this economic disconnect. Physical connectivity between Africa and the Caribbean is limited. There are few, if any, direct maritime or air transport links. This logistical disconnect not only raises the cost of doing business, but also limits the trade volumes and the movement of people. Shipping companies tend to prioritize established north, south, and east-west trade corridors. There are no major shipping lines or airlines that directly connect African ports like Lagos, Abidjan, or Durban with Caribbean ports such as Kingston or Bridgetown. There is also the lack of trade agreements. Trade agreement between Africa and Caribbean is not supported by bilateral or regional trade agreements. African countries are part of the African Continental Free Trade Area, while Caribbean nations participate in CARICOM single market. However, these blocks are not linked by any formal trade mechanism. The absence of these agreements lead to high tariffs, non-tariff barriers, and limited regulatory harmonization. Rules of origin, custom procedures, and product standards differ significantly between these regions and thereby impede trade. There is also a weak private sector. Hitherto, there have been very limited interactions between African and Caribbean private sector with low level of awareness of market opportunities, as well as potential partnerships and financing options. Business forum, trade expos, investment promotion agencies rarely seek to highlight the opportunities between these regions. Moreover, SMEs in both regions face financing constraints, making it difficult to explore cross-Atlantic ventures without the support of government or development partners. Institutional frameworks for economic cooperations are also underdeveloped. While there have been symbolic summits and declarations, such as the first Africa CARICOM Summit, held in 2021 and hosted by Kenya, there have been very limited efforts to follow through. Coordination between the African Union and CARICOM remains nascent. There are also limited diplomatic missions between the two regions, reducing the institutional infrastructure for building economic bridges. However, there are opportunities to enhance investment and trade. Despite these challenges, several opportunities exist to boost investment and trade partnership between Africa and the Caribbean. These include agriculture and agro-processing, which was well highlighted by the first panel today, covering products such as cocoa, coffee, spices, tropical fruits, which could all be exported to the Caribbean from Africa. Pharmaceutical and healthcare. Caribbean nations like Cuba have strong pharmaceutical sectors, which could serve as a basis for partnership with the health sector in Africa to boost local supply. Tourism and the creative industry, which have also been highlighted by the earlier speaker. Africa and Caribbean could have strong tourism sectors in partnership prospects that could create synergies and mutually beneficial opportunities. There's also an opportunity in education and IT. African universities and Caribbean medical schools can collaborate through exchange programs, physical and online education and research opportunities. Strategies to boost investments and trade. To unlock the investment and trade potentials between the two regions, the following critical steps will be necessary. Implementation of a strategic Africa-CARICOM trade agreement. There is need to develop a preferential trade agreement for partnership framework between AFTA and CARICOM that will harmonize tariffs, standard, custom processes. Such agreements, which could cover key products and services, will help to catalyze trade flows between Africa and the Caribbean. The agreement should also include investment promotion services, liberalizations such as in areas of finance, education, and tourism, and labor mobility, legal and regulatory alignment in key areas such as dispute resolution, intellectual property, will also help support the private sector participation. There's also need for investment in logistics and connectivity. African ports such as Dakar, Lagos, and Accra could serve as transshipment hubs to Caribbean. Similarly, Caribbean ports like Bridgetown and Port of Spain could also be developed as gateways to the Americas for African exports. Investment in logistic infrastructure, including cold chains, warehousing, port modernization, will all be supported through public-private partnerships. Financial instruments and credit support. Export credit agencies and development finance institutions such as the Nigerian Export-Import Bank and commercial banks in both regions will need to develop financing tools for Africa-Caribbean trade. Such financial interventions will be required not only to develop the necessary logistic and trade infrastructure, but also for the acquisition of machinery and equipment, for value addition as well as working capital for trade transactions. This will help raise the potential increase in trade volumes, which is projected about 1.8 billion by 2028, according to a study by the International Trade Center and Afri-Carribean Bank. Afri-Carribean Bank has already taken the right step in this direction through the establishment of a Caribbean office, which was launched in Barbados in 2023, towards supporting trade finance, credit guarantee, and advisory services. Other institutions should replicate this example. It will also be necessary to establish joint venture funds, trade finance lines, and diaspora bonds, all to unlock capital for cross-border businesses. There's also the need for digital platforms and market information. So creating digital trade platform that showcases business opportunities, product catalogs, and bids from both regions can reduce information asymmetry. Africa Caribbean Trade Portal, managed jointly by trade promotion agencies, will facilitate matchmaking and e-commerce. Blockchain-based solutions could also be used for verifying certificates of origin, contracts, and logistics towards enhancing trust and transparency. There's also the role of diaspora and cultural diplomacy. Diaspora communities play a powerful role in bridging trade gaps. Caribbean population of African descent can serve as major drivers of business investments and cultural engagements. Governments should encourage the diaspora through policy frameworks that support entrepreneurship and dual citizenship, and investment incentives. The African Union's sixth region initiative, which is dedicated towards representing and advocating for African diaspora worldwide, should be operationalized in support of Afri-Caribbean economic activities. Also, cultural diplomacy through festivals, exchange, and storytelling can also shift perception and build affinity that supports trade. The institutional framework and political will, finally, sustained progress will require high-level political commitment and institutional backing. The 2021 Africa-CARICOM Summit should be institutionalized as a regular platform with a dedicated secretariat to coordinate mechanisms. Additionally, embassies, trade missions, and chambers of commerce should be encouraged in both regions to promote investment and trade. Technical cooperation between African Union Commission and the CARICOM Secretariat must also be strengthened. A dedicated Africa-Caribbean Business Council composed of public and private sector stakeholders can monitor implementation and ensure continuity beyond political cycles. The role of Nexim Bank. In closing my remark, I would like to briefly mention the role of the Nigerian Export-Import Bank in promoting trade and investment relationship between Africa and Caribbean. We are a wholly owned government institution owned by the federal government of Nigeria and established in 1991 as an export credit agency and an export development bank. Our mandate is to promote the diversification of the Nigerian economy and boost export trade through the provision of finance, risk-bearing, and advisory services. In line with our new strategic focus, we are desirous of boosting Nigeria's trade with the regional and non-traditional markets, including the Caribbean. I'm therefore using this opportunity to invite prospective investors and exporters to avail themselves of the opportunities of our services. I wish to also note that we are promoting digital marketing and information exchange through our Cocoa Connect, which is a digital platform launched in January 2024 to bring together all stakeholders in the cocoa sector, including producers, buyers, sellers, processors, and researchers. The objective is to facilitate and promote continuous interaction, which will lead to development of the sector through increased production and trade. Our plan is to replicate this in other sectors. So in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, bridging the trade gap between Africa and the Caribbean is both a historical imperative and an economic opportunity. The two regions, bound by common heritage and shared challenges, must leverage their similarities for economic benefits. The way forward lies in building connectivity, harmonizing trade regimes, mobilizing finance, and activating the private sector by leveraging on institutions like the African Export-Import Bank, the Nigerian Export-Import Bank, CARICOM, and the African Union, and by empowering the diaspora, Africa and the Caribbean can usher in a new era of South-South economic cooperation. Thank you for your kind attention.
Please another round of applause for him. Thank you very, very much. And in a nutshell, for us to be able to overcome barriers to Africa-Caribbean trade and investment, he has asked us to focus more on addressing logistical challenges, regulatory differences, create market awareness, and limitless access to finance, while also leveraging initiatives such as the Afri-Caribbean Trade and Investment Forum and Afri-Exim's Bank AATC networks, and more. That was Abba Bello, the Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of Nexim Bank, speaking through Mohammed Awami. Please can we give him another round of applause? Thank you so very much. We appreciate you. And so we're going to moving on very quickly to the next segment. And this next segment is going to be talking about building sustainable international businesses. We have some very carefully selected individuals who are experts in their chosen fields to please talk about this. And I'd like to just very quickly invite Ms. Karine Matsiko Taylor, the Head Trade Finance DP World Sub-Saharan Africa. Can we please invite her over to the side of the divide? Please, a warm round of applause for her. She makes her way here. Thank you very much. Please, feel free. We then also want to invite Messiah Alain, the CEO, Chamber of Industry and Commerce, St. Kitts and Nevis, to also please take her seat on the side. It's all women's affair, if you ask my candid opinion. And to moderate this very esteemed session, it is my honor and privilege to invite our moderator, Ms. Enene Ejembi. Can we please welcome her with a resounding applause as well? And by the way, I must confess that this trio have something in common. Apart from their professional fields, they have very irresistible sets of dentition. Can we please applaud them one more time? Can't you see that? Am I right? Did I say it right? They are beautiful. Thank you very much. All right, very quickly, I'll just bring us up to speed with our moderator. NNHMB is a global development leader whose early career in retail banking and expertise in strategy execution informs her work advancing progress towards the Sustainable Development Goals. She has led teams that deliver technical assistance in economic growth, health systems, and strengthening governance reform and education development across Nigeria. Over the years, she has worked with global and development firms and donor agencies, including DAI, Malaria Consortium, Tetra Tech, and the United Nations Global Compact, USAID, and the UK Foreign, as well as Commonwealth and Development Office. Today, she leads her own international development consulting firm, Verbatim Virtual Solutions, driving impact through strategy execution and donor partnerships. A Gates Foundation goalkeeper, that should be Melinda Gates, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation goalkeeper. NNA is a trustee on the board of Accountability Laboratory, a global civil society organization focused on open governance and accountability. She holds a BA in English Literature from the prestigious University of Jos, Nigeria, and an in a Master's in Literature in English Studies from the University of Dundee, United Kingdom, and professional certifications from the Knowledge Management Institute, Washington, D.C., United States of America. Her career reflects a commitment to improving the material condition of citizens, fostering collaboration and strengthening governance systems to creating sustainable changes. Very distinguished ladies and gentlemen, very lengthy and intimidating resume, but have decided to abridge it. So I hand over proceedings at this point in time to Ms. Enene Ejembi, our moderator. Thank you very much. Please a warm round of applause for them.
Thank you, Andy Gabriel. I'll start by saying a big thank you to the Aquarian team led by Aisha Maina for this wonderful event, and to our focus country. Thank you for being our guests and for coming with your A game. We look forward to a great conversation. If we call an all-male panel a manel, what do we call an all-female panel? A womanel? Femme panel? Powernel. I like that. So let's give it to them. I'll start by introducing Sanya Aline, right next to me. She's the Executive Director of the Chamber of Industry and Commerce at St. Kitts and Nevis. And she's an experienced trade policy specialist. She's a legal advisor. She's also an educator. She has a passion for public policy and international law. She's experienced in diplomacy, international law, governance, trade policy, and development. And she has a proven track record in the provision of regulatory advice, capacity building, project management, and operations. She has academic grounding in law, trade policy, international relations, and education. Now that's power, if we ever saw it. And we have Karen Matsiko-Taylor, who's joining us from South Africa. She's a Senior Director, Trade Finance, Sub-Saharan Africa with DP World. She's an esteemed figure in banking and logistics, currently leading trade finance for DP World's sub-Saharan African business. And she has over 2 decades of experience in finance, including a tenure on Wall Street at several top-tier firms. And she developed an interest in sustainable trends in emerging markets and relocated to Africa to bridge funding gaps in business. Now we have 2 experts. Please give them a round of applause. And I think that this is a good composition, considering we're talking about sustainable business. We have a trade policy expert, and we have a trade finance expert. So I'll just set the context for us. We're talking about building sustainable businesses, and we're not only talking about profitability, although that is very essential, but we're also talking about businesses that are profitable over the long term and can maintain that through their business practices, their compliance, their funding, their financing, all of that. But we also want to talk about social sustainability. So are these enterprises resilient? Are they inclusive? Are they ethical? And will they leave the social structure more cohesive than before? Are they environmentally sustainable? Do they have practices that will protect ecosystems, ensure resource stewardship for next generations? So we're going to touch on all of these elements, but our main focus today is long-term regional impact and profitability. We're going to look at trade, we're going to look at investment, we're going to look at identity-driven enterprise, like we've talked about our shared culture and history. We're also going to talk about financing systems, because these are still emerging markets. And while we do have frameworks like AFA, like we learned today, OECS, CARICOM, ECOWAS, we know that the potential of all of these arrangements are not yet fully utilized, so they'll be bringing their expertise to talk to us. So there's an opportunity here to forge new paths rooted in our shared identity and cross-regional collaboration. So let's explore how. Sanya's expertise is in trade policy, so she'll focus on that. I would like to ask you, Sanya, what are the biggest trade policy or ecosystem shifts in your experience that are needed to be unlocked for us to have sustainable business growth, not only in the Caribbean, but also in partnership with Africa?
Good morning, everyone. And thank you for the question. The presenter before me would have done a very comprehensive overview of the various mechanisms that can be implemented. But I would like to focus on one in particular. He would have made mention of the need to possibly engage in negotiations for a free trade arrangement, a preferential free trade arrangement. And I think that's one of the biggest policy shifts that can facilitate further liberalization of goods and services and investment between the regions. And if we were to drill down into what that could look like, we can look at facilitating liberalization across goods which are considered to be specifically beneficial to each region to be able to trade in. So the statistics indicate that less than 1% of trade is occurring between the CARICOM region and the African continent. And this doesn't indicate that there isn't a possibility that this can grow. It just means that, one, as indicated by the Honorable Minister, we need greater trade data. Additionally, we need to be able to undertake further exploratory missions to be able to inform the negotiation of said trade agreement. But let me take a step back and let's go back into the framework of this trade agreement. So liberalizing goods, looking at particular sectors, ensuring that if we're going to liberalize trading goods, agricultural goods or agro-processed goods or finished goods, that we identify specific sensitive sectors for which we may facilitate phased-in liberalization or build protections around those sensitive sectors, right? Agriculture tends to be one, but perhaps we could look at where we can liberalize certain agricultural goods to facilitate meaningful trade and build and feeding into regional and global value chains. Additionally, liberalizing trade in services. So we've spoken about tourism, we've spoken about cultural and creative services, but we also have to look at financial services, right? There's a possibility there or for liberalization to encourage investment. And we also have to look at how can we get to the nitty-gritty trade policy mechanisms. So the speaker yesterday would have mentioned the waiver of visas. And this can be facilitated through either an absolute waiver or looking at specific intra-corporate transferee categories or business support categories, whereby you could facilitate visa-free entry of professionals, looking at particular sectors of interest. So education services, as I would have mentioned yesterday, tourism services, and also, if I may, even look at possibly construction and agriculture, agricultural services, like knowledge transfer. Taking a step forward, we can look at investment as well. If I recall, the speaker before us was speaking about, in the framework of that free trade arrangement, making arrangements for an investment chapter. That's a possibility. Or possibly engaging in a bilateral trade investment treaty and carving out provisions that would encourage and incentivize not only investment promotion, but itself protecting investors' rights, right? And so I would rest here, I won't bore persons any further, but it is important to consider the negotiation of such a framework, because that will set the pace and open up market access within the region and amongst the region. Thanks.
Excellent. She talked about, please, a round of applause. Yes, it is in order. She talked about preferential free trade. I love that word. So it's not just trade liberalization, which is what it is, but we want those preferential agreements and arrangements that will allow us to trade more. She talked about visa-free travel, and yesterday I found out that actually travel from Nigeria, for Nigerian citizens, into St. Kitts and Nevis is actually visa-free. So where you need a visa is when you're transiting through another country where you require a visa. So a round of applause, that's great that that's there. And I think part of what we need to do is also to increase awareness of where we already have some preferential situations where we can leverage between our two nations. Thank you very much, Aline. I'll come to you, Karen, and I will like to pick your brain about trade finance. So how can we ensure trade finance also prioritizes inclusive development goals, especially for women-led small businesses, youth-led businesses as well?
Thank you. I think before we get into the technical and the technical dimensions of trade and investment, I think it's imperative to acknowledge that people should really be at the center of everything. It's a universal truth, you know. Whether we are speaking of ESG or we are speaking about economic transformation building, none of that can happen without people. And in South Africa, we encapsulate it in the philosophy of Ubuntu, which means I am because we are, right? So as much as ESG thrives on people, legacy is carried forward by people. And strategy may set the direction, but it's really the people ultimately who execute and refine and carry on the legacy. So I'll come to that point, but I think it's very important to kind of build a construct. So there are certain things that, you know, we all know that Africa is abundant with resources, and I can assure you, everyone in this room is looking for the right partner. And I think that is imperative when we're thinking of building sustainable businesses. And the 5 reflections on really how to define trajectory of enterprises is identifying the right stakeholders. I think Nigerians, St. Kitts and Nevis onto something, you know. I think instead of it being a marriage of convenience, we can think of it as an ordained by God marriage, you know, where we know it will carry forward. You know, building the right team. You know, I think yesterday someone on Ms. Miner's team talked about, you know, with pride and conviction in believing in her vision. And that's the reason why her business has been able to thrive for 16 years plus. Investing in relationships, you know, that is really the true currency of long-term relationships. And planning for legacy. Someone recently told me, and I quote, "Without legs, legacy doesn't travel." So succession planning is really important. And going back to your question, about how can we make sure that trade finance is inclusive for women and youth. Unfortunately, the financial system was not built for small businesses. And that's why I make it a point to sit in rooms talking to the youth and women on how to prepare themselves when trying to seek funding. So one of the things is, digitizing your access, making sure that you have records for credit, because that is the one thing that a bank or financial institution will look at and say, you don't have a history of credit, therefore I cannot lend you money. So I know women tend to want to do everything, but that's the one thing you need to let go of is outsource the financial aspect. So that is taken care of by, an auditing firm or even a small, I'm sure someone knows someone who knows a CA who can be able to build that. So being able to tell your story through a financial model is going to be one of the ways that trade financing is second to nature for banks to be able to lend out. One of the things I really talk about is digitizing, everything. Someone talked about blockchain. If we don't jump on that bandwagon, I remember speaking about blockchain about 15 years ago on Wall Street, and people thought I was crazy, and now it's a big thing. If you did not get onto it then, you're now trying to catch up. So trying to catch up with AI, basically equip yourself to make sure that you're able to be at the same wavelength as multinationals, even if you're a small business. I think that is a way to really tackle it. And to me, I think it's not using a one paintbrush fits all. I think very often financial institutions like to do that. At my former employer, ABSA, we had specific criteria for women and youth. That was not really eliminating everything, but we kind of had soft, criteria whilst mitigating risk ultimately, because we're not a charity. So I think having the tools and packaging your product in such a way that it is competitive, I think is a way to tackle into the trade finance market.
Excellent. So that speaks exactly to what we're trying to say, that it's more inclusive so that it doesn't lower the bar, but it works with proxies that give you the same financial information that you need for your records and for your controls, but then you are able to fund traditionally excluded businesses and enterprises. Thank you. We'll go to talk about governance. And I'll speak to Sanya because with your current role, you have a lot of experience in terms of chambers of commerce. What role can you say they play in bridging the policy gap between what the private sector needs and what we need to make sure these regional agreements actually lead to increased business and prosperity?
So yesterday, I said a mouthful. And one of the things I would have indicated is that private sector requires a seat at the table when it comes to policy development. And I would have indicated that in St. Kitts and Nevis, there is a good model of good governance of including the private sector in every dialogue on every policy that is being developed. I think what needs to occur is enhancing that. So I would advocate for that particular model, not only just in St. Kitts and Nevis, but outside in the wider Caribbean. And also, I cannot speak to the states within the African continent, but that level of internal coordination, involvement and engagement. And so what the Chamber's role then is to coordinate its members, obtain data and information that would assist the government in being able to design policies, strategies that not only support private sector, but is informed by the private sector. Because at the end of the day, it's the adage we all use in trade policy. Government does not trade, businesses. Well, apparently the panel, everyone has fallen asleep except us on the panel. So I'm going to try that again. Government does not trade, but businesses. Okay, well, I see, it seems not everybody knows, but businesses trade, and businesses engage in trade. And so this is what is essential. Another aspect for, I would say, the chamber is to ensure that information is shared. We go back to the issue of the information deficit, and that is what seems to be a significant barrier to being able to incentivize private sector to export. They do not know what are the opportunities. They do not know about the various trade agreements. They do not know about the different, let's say, duty-free access or opportunities to even tap into global or regional value chains. And so the chambers have a responsibility to gather, obtain information, store information, share information, but also collaborate with other chambers, because I was making mention of that yesterday as well, in the context of the regional fora. So for the Caribbean, we have two frameworks in which we regionally collaborate as chambers. There is the OECS Business Council, which is a construct that has come out of the OECS Commission, which is the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States. And then there is CARICHAM, which is a construct or a network of chambers across the region under the framework of the Caribbean community. And we share information. We support each other's activities as well. So if a chamber has one training capacity, training initiative occurring, they share that information amongst the other chambers to encourage their members to actually undertake the training as well. So capacity building is also critical in terms of being able to support private sector to not only maximize its benefits, but also to become more empowered through information to do exactly what you were suggesting, improving on their financial management, being able to undertake their own market intelligence. And I would end by saying chambers also have a responsibility to support each other with trade missions. So at this point in time, I probably shouldn't even announce this, but we are engaging bilaterally with other chambers in the region to facilitate trade missions into St. Kitts and Nevis, and for our private sector to go into those particular markets. And I think that is really and honestly a more meaningful and tangible way that we can be beneficial. And I would be eager to engage with the Nigeria Chamber to facilitate a similar initiative. And I think this is how we get rubber hitting the road. And I'll end here.
A round of applause for her. I think that is absolutely amazing. So information dissemination, collaborating on trade missions, not only within the Caribbean, but now also with Africa. And I think that is, like you say, one of the ways that we can get things going. Excellent. Thank you very much, Sanya. I'll come to you, Karen. What barriers do businesses face in securing trade finance? We know that the global financial architecture has not been fair to African nations, right? So we know about those barriers. Speak a little bit to what the barriers are, but also tell us what innovations or policies are helping to close that divide.
Absolutely. So you're absolutely right about the KYC. Part of that, the barriers for trade finance, and some of them are the high collateral requirements, where you go to a bank and they're asking for your kidney or buildings or whatever that typically small businesses would not have. I make fun of it, but it's such a big thing for SMEs. And I talk about SMEs because an SME in Africa is not the same SME in the UAE. I was in a discussion about 3 weeks ago, and a small SME in the UAE is a turnover of $67.5 million US.
Okay.
So now we need to understand and make it bespoke to African SMEs. And Africa, we would still need to dissect it to Nigeria, to Ghana, to Senegal, to South Africa, to Swaziland, wherever. But also, that is an issue, high collateral requirements, the stringent KYC requirements that, quote unquote, the Western world likes to have, but we need to be able to speak up and say, we might not have what you're asking, but this is an alternative to whatever you're asking for. So that is my role as an African in a global business, advocating to make sure that things are changed. The lack of formal credit history I spoke about, that is a real issue. I find it particularly higher in the agri sector, where there's really a hunger to do business, but because farmers, as an example, just don't have the time to take care of their finances, that is where an issue is. And the perceived risk in emerging markets. I think people like the idea of doing business in Africa. It's sexy, but they don't really understand Africa, and then they start to pull away. So if you understand the opportunities, but also the risks, but the risk mitigants, I think that's where businesses can thrive. And I think this is something that unfortunately the African countries, including Nigeria, have faced, the currency and political volatility. That is a real issue. How do we fix that, though? There are so many ways on how to fix it, and supply chain finance is something that I really thrive on, because we just shouldn't look at the big corporates, but the suppliers, the smaller suppliers under. That is who we should be funding. And we have a supply chain program in my organization that I'm really focused on, to push for farmers, to push for businesses that could typically not stand alone and get financing, but as a consortium, we're able to fund them. Having trade insurance, that is way to mitigate risk. I was recently at an ex-cred event, and insurance is something that if African entities can focus on that and be able to support our businesses, that would be critical in ensuring that the issues I'd spoken about are fixed. Blockchain and open account systems, we keep talking about the AFCFTA, but we need to implement from an open account perspective where, because we're neighbors, we don't need to get guarantees and credits, but it's really built on trust. And one of the ways on doing that is having a blockchain system where there's transparency. Everyone can see from cradle to grave what's happening, meaning there's little interference or a risk of fraud. So I think jumping on the blockchain, I find that the younger generation is much more receptive to it, but it's something that if we can harness it, it can boom and bring a lot of businesses for our continent.
Excellent. Thank you very much. A round of applause for her. She's talked about blockchain technology, business insurance, supply chain finances as some of the innovations that can address the issues. I want to dig a little bit deeper, because you talked about the perception of risk. And I think that's one of the biggest opportunities and reasons why it makes sense for us that look like each other to do business with each other, because we're both on the short end of the stick when it comes to that. Would you say that the perception of risk is real, or would you say that it is blown out of proportion, and what do we need to do?
I want to say it's actually real.
Okay.
And I'll say this from my previous roles, not my current role, because, let's talk about working in the banking industry. There's so much opportunity in Africa. And I focused on emerging markets in college just to understand the perception. So you'll have an investor come in and say, I need you to lend out $100 million US to an African entity. But the requirements they ask for are impossible, And that's the reason why we need to be advocates for each other as African entities to say, actually, I can vouch for a Nigerian firm. I think Nigeria, one of the strengths is from a risk perspective, most of the banks actually can come to Nigeria and learn how to mitigate risk,
yes,
because risk is so low, yes, from a Nigeria perspective. So I think leveraging best practices is something that's critical. I think in South Africa, one of the things I was privy to last year was we were sent to Singapore to try and get best practices. Having a blueprint on something where you don't move away from that blueprint, you can tweak around it, but it stays. Mm-hmm. And that's why I think Singapore has been able to thrive for the past 50 years, because that blueprint stays regardless of new government coming mm-hmm. in. So we need to understand that no one is coming to save us. We are actually here, and this room can change it, but it starts with trust. It starts with fostering relationships where it's not just in it for me, but how can I help my sister or my brother to ensure that they thrive, to take it to international levels, you know? So I think we need to understand that, you know, Afro-Caribbean, you know, this is it, because we need to build our own legacy and not rely, as we can see, on quote-unquote aid that is now starting to dwindle.
Excellent. Thank you very much. The imperative thing, no one is coming to save us. I heard Dangote say that last year at the UN General Assembly when we were having the Global Africa Business Initiative, and I think that message is diffusing widely, and so we're saving ourselves.
Yes, ma'am.
We are coming to the end of this panel. We want to talk a little bit about cultural identity. So I'll ask the same question to the both of you, and as you give us your response, give us your final words as well. Can you share an example from your work where cultural identity helped build trust and secure a partnership? And I really want us to talk about trust because Karen is big on values, so am I, and a lot of times we think that economic development is going to happen through technical solutions alone. A big part of it rests on our value system and how much we can align. So share an example from your work where cultural identity helps build trust and secure a partnership.
Cultural identity. So I would consider myself a global citizen because I've lived in Botswana, Uganda, Zambia, the US, and now in South Africa. So having to take care of businesses spanning across 48 countries in Africa, you need to understand their culture. You know, just don't go in expecting to impose, you know. I think in every country, you know, in East Africa as an example, I can apply the same thing in Kenya as I can to Uganda, even if they're neighbors. We need to understand the nuances and respect their culture. So to me, it's not going with savior mentality per se, but how can I leverage my experience, but also you help me understand your culture, because I am South African. I hadn't lived in South Africa. And going there, I had to learn how to understand the culture. You know, I got a coach because I came from New York and everything was, you know, strict
Go.
And go. And in South Africa, they have a different approach. And I had to respect that. Even if I'm South African, I didn't really grow up in the South African culture, but it was imperative for me to learn the culture in order to thrive. And by me learning culture is where I built trust, where people said, you get me, therefore I can trust you. So that is really the base of it, understanding culture.
Excellent. A round of applause. She's hit on something fundamental, which is that to build trust, you must go in with respect. Mutual respect is the foundation of trust. And I'll come to you, Sanya. Same question. Can you share an example from your work where cultural identity helps build trust or secure a partnership?
So I think we have a similar story. So I won't go too much into my similar story. I've lived also in different locations. I've lived in Trinidad. I'm actually from Trinidad and Tobago. I've lived in Barbados. I have lived in Switzerland, and I have also now lived in St. Kitts and Nevis. And yes, you have to respect and understand different cultures, not only for your professional life, but even for interpersonal relationships, because business is about interpersonal relationships. It's about not only just trust, but a sense of community, a sense of closeness, a sense of understanding. So I do feel you there. But outside of that, and also I've worked with international organizations, so my way of doing business is different. So I had to tailor that to meet the needs of my various stakeholders. But to come out of the personal side of it, I would like to widen it a bit and look at it also from the perspective, if I may, of the Caribbean. So how does the Caribbean do business with the world? Tapping into its own identity. And I would say the cultural aspect of the Caribbean, right? And particularly in relation to St. Kitts and Nevis, looking at sugar mass, right? Looking at the traditional carnival characters, the distinct type of soca, and also the warmth of the people, that authenticity assists in being able to promote, market the goods of St. Kitts and Nevis, but more so, it allows persons to connect, just like how I, as an individual, have to connect with others in a genuine and authentic way. And I think that is what assists countries to be able to brand their product according to its nationality. So the Caribbean has been looking at the Caribbean brand, or brand Caribbean, for authentically Caribbean. I think it was the terminology of the brand for some time. And underneath that, each island started to develop its brand. So St. Kitts, it is Follow Your Heart. Nevis is Nevis Nice, which I must say I love that, that particular brand. Grenada is Pure Grenada. And these things, therefore, tie not only into the geographical uniqueness of the territory, but it also provides one with that sense of quality, of luxury. And I think that's how you leverage the authenticity of your community and your culture towards being able to build a brand that is globally recognized.
Excellent, excellent. A round of applause for both of these distinguished panelists. We've explored how sustainable business means more than just profit. It's about transformation, it's about policy coherence, it's about funding that can be accessed, and it's about identity-driven growth. We've talked about the need to negotiate preferential trade agreements, consider visa-free travel, which with Nigeria and St. Kitts and Nevis we do have. We talked about digitizing financial records so that you can access, leveraging technologies such as blockchain, and chambers of commerce and the role that they play in fostering the growth of enterprises so that they can grow to be more sustainable internationally and doing trade across our various regions. As somebody deeply inspired by somebody born in Nevis, Alexander Hamilton, I would be remiss if I didn't leave you with a quote from the Broadway musical. There's a million things we haven't done together, but just you wait. Just you wait. We are young, we are scrappy, we are hungry, and we're not going to throw away this shot. Please, a round of applause for this panel.
Please, can we applaud them one more time? Let's have you over here for photograph, please. Thank you. I hope it won't be out of place if we ask the convener and the Honorable Prime Minister to please join them, and the Premier of Nevis. Meanwhile, let me recognize the former President of Mauritius here with us, Her Excellency Dr. Amina Gharib Fakim. Welcome. Please, a round of applause for her. We're glad to have you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right, still in the spirit of preserving memories and freezing time, we're still going to have a group photograph. Please, I would like to, the Prime Minister, Honorable Dr. Terence, and we also have the former President of Mauritius, Amina Gharib Fakim, the Premier of Nevis, Honorable Mark Brantley. Would also like to call on the Minister of Agriculture and Food Security, Honorable Afri-Carribean, the Minister of Agriculture, the Minister of Agriculture, St. Kitts and Nevis, Honorable Samuel Duggins. Also would want to call on our convener to please join us still. I hope she's not tired of taking photographs with us. And delegation from St. Kitts and Nevis, please join us. Oh, Mr. A.T. Umbonge from Afri-Carribean, please join us as well. Thank you. So we can have the tall ones in front and the taller ones at the back. to see everyone's face. Beautiful. Wide smiles. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. If you intend to make that a clap for them, can we make it a clap, please? Thank you. Thank you very much. We are moving very briskly to the next segment. And we'd like to appreciate the Honorable Minister of Agriculture and Food Security in Nigeria, Senator Afri-Carribean, CON, and due to the exigencies of his office, he might not be able to stay with us till the end of today's session, so he'll be making his way back to the office. And so we'd like to appreciate you. Please, a warm round of applause for him as he takes leave of us. Thank you very much. And at this juncture, we'll be constituting the next panel. And without much ado, resting on the already established protocols, would like to invite first our very dear Honorable Dr. Terence Jew, the Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis, who also doubles as the Minister of Finance of St. Kitts and Nevis. Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for joining us on this side. The next person we'll be inviting will be the Special Advisor to the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria on Finance and the Economy, Ms. Sayade Okoli. Please, a warm round of applause for her as well. As she's taking her seat, we'd also want to invite the moderator for this session to also join us on this side, Mr. Peter Olowodnani, Director, Client Relations, Anglo-West Africa, Afri-Carribean Bank. Thank you very much for joining us. First, we'll start by having to bring us up to speed in an abridged form. The Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis, who also doubles as the Honorable Minister of Finance. The Honorable Dr. Terence Michael Jew currently serves as the Prime Minister and Minister of Finance and National Security, Citizenship and Immigration, Health and Human Resources Management and Social Security of St. Kitts and Nevis. Prime Minister Dr. Jew has provided years of dedicated service as a medical practitioner specializing in the field of internal medicine. He began his medical career as a general practitioner at the Joseph N. France General Hospital and later branched off into his own private practice. In June 2013, he became a member of the American College of Medicine and American Medical Association and is a diplomat of the American Board of Internal Medicine. He is often referred to as the caring Dr. Jew, as he has committed himself to creating environments of support and advancement. A community activist and a philanthropist by nature, Dr. Jew has been actively involved within society, providing dependable leadership on various community initiatives, including the empowerment of youth and marginalized groups such as the disabled and elderly. He believes in the development of our youth and has worked ardently since his acceptance of the office of service to the people to ensuring that young people are recognized and provided adequate opportunities to advance. Prime Minister Dr. Jew believes that they are stronger when we care. It was this belief, diligent efforts to building a personal relationship with the people within his community and attentiveness to their needs and concerns that led him to establishing the Compassionate Action to Reach and Empower, that is known as CARE Foundation, in February of 2021. I want to abridge it, but ladies and gentlemen, I introduce to you Honorable Dr. Terence Drew, who currently serves as the lead head with responsibility of issues pertaining to human resource development, health, and HIV and AIDS in the CARICOM Quasi Cabinet. And he is the Prime Minister as well as Minister of Finance of St. Kitts and Nevis. Please, a warm round of applause for him.
I'm also going to be introducing one of our panelists. Sonyode Okoli is a leading African finance expert with 3 decades of experience across policy advisory, financial advisory, private equity, corporate, commercial, and management finance, as well as auditing. She's currently the special advisor to the Nigeria's president on finance and the economy. She's resident in the office of the Honorable Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy, leading on the Minister's economic coordination efforts and operating as Chief of Staff. Prior to that, she was the CEO of Alpha African Advisory Limited and also a trained transformational life coach focused on inner healing and restoration. Sonyode holds an MA in Mechanical Engineering from Cambridge University, UK. She's a member of the Institute of Chartered Accountants, England and Wales, and a fellow of the Aspen Global Leadership Network, and a member of the Institute of Directors, Nigeria. Ladies and gentlemen, please a round of applause for Ms. Sonyode Okoli.
And now to the very distinguished moderator for the session. Peter Adeshola Olowonani is the head of client relations responsible for Anglophone West Africa, which comprises of Nigeria, Ghana, Liberia, Sierra Leone, Gambia, and Cape Verde at the African Export-Import Bank. He joined the African Export-Import Bank in July of 2015 as Manager Business Development, Anglophone West Africa region. He currently oversees clients' relations and is responsible for the execution of the business development plans encompassing trade finance, guarantees, specialized finance, advisory and capital markets, corporate banking, export development, and project financing. Peter holds a certificate in project management from the George Washington University, United States of America, certificate of finance in international trade from the University of Malta, and an MBA from the University of Lagos, Nigeria. He has vast experience in manufacturing, maritime, aviation, financial institutions, oil and gas industry. Peter has structured transactions and availed credit across the oil and gas upstream, midstream, and downstream value chain in excess of $15 billion in the last 10 years. To abridge his citation, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I present to you our very erudite moderator for this session, Peter Adeshola Olowonani. Over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, and good afternoon to the audience and Prime Minister. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to be taking on this panel. I think very clearly from all we've said yesterday, we can have all these ideas between the collaboration that Africa and the Caribbean should have, but if there is no finance, finance will definitely remain the legs, as we heard even just moments ago, and be the wings on which our collaboration and our partnership will thrive. We will not sell, you produce coconut, we have coconut. You have the sea, we have the sea, but manufactured exports, oil and gas, refined products, which are consumables, those are the kind of things that would drive trade between Africa and the Caribbean. And once we can have such a rich a bouquet of trade products, our economies can be more interrelated. And then we will start seeing people move from Africa to the Caribbean. We'll have enough people to fill a plane and create economies for airlines to want to actively create a direct route. So that's why this panel, the imperative of this panel is very clear, that we need to just discuss and understand the role of finance. We have a shared heritage, we have common challenges as to access to finance, and that's basically what we'll be espousing as we carry on this panel. Prime Minister, I'll start with you, given that you are both an economic head and a political head. And I will ask the easiest question. How has history, colonialism, slave trade, the unbalance, the misalignment in political architecture, how has it impacted access to finance in the Caribbean?
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator, and to my fellow panelists. Thank you very much for being here. And to all of us who are here this afternoon, Madam President, listening to us, I think it's afternoon by now, is it? Yes. Let me say that is a very important question. Just to go back a bit in history, just so people understand how the Caribbean was formed. The Caribbean was originally inhabited by the indigenous people, specifically the Kalinagos in St. Kitts and Nevis. In the 15th century, we all know the famous story of Christopher Columbus, who set sail to find a new route to get Europe, not to pass through the Middle East, to get around to India. However, it is said that he came upon the Caribbean. In the Caribbean, they worked the indigenous people to death. In my country, they were totally annihilated. I only know of one person who survived from that time, from the Kalinagos. After they would have annihilated the Kalinagos, they then came to West Africa to trade with the African kingdoms, and part of that trade was the trade of people. And so they brought them over to the Caribbean to work on the sugarcane fields and the tobacco fields to create wealth for Europe. Why do I say all of that? To remind us that it was these small countries in the Caribbean, these islands, where Europe was able to accumulate its capital to fund the Industrial Revolution. I want to say that, and we must understand that. St. Kitts had become what you call the mother colony of the whole of Great Britain within the Caribbean region. And it was known to have very fertile soil. So the return from the sugar production was extremely high and extremely profitable to the United Kingdom or to England. And so England was able to even use that capital to spread effectively to other countries and eventually reach around to India. And we know what happened in India, and we also know what happened in Africa. So the story started in the 15th century on these Caribbean islands building wealth. Since that time, we went through colonization, emancipation, colonization, and lead to independence. And the independence uprising started in St. Kitts and Nevis again in the 1930s before the Second World War with the Buckley's uprising that led to the Moyne Commission, and it charted the way to independence, not just in the Caribbean, but all the way through Africa and around to India as well, if you look at the history. So it started in the Caribbean on both ends. That has left us with a colonial architecture in terms of finance, in terms of the political system. Unlike other nations that receive compensation and reparation to structure the economy, we were left with absolutely nothing. The Germans, after the Second World War, we know that they got compensation. The Japanese, they got compensation. We did not get any compensation as the indigenous inhabitants, or the inhabitants of St. Kitts and Nevis, rather. Do you know who got compensation for slavery in the Caribbean? The slave owners. England paid them when they had to leave the countries as compensation for the loss that they said they would have had by giving up their plantations and all of their holdings. It is a travesty. And I cannot speak to economic advancement and development and political advancement and development without understanding the context of the history. Now, understanding that and that backdrop with absolutely no help, with absolutely no investments, we had to declare our independence and chart our own course. And we are still suffering tremendously from that era of underdevelopment, that era where we lacked investments, that era where we were totally oppressed and suppressed. Nonetheless, just like Africa, we gained our independence and liberation. So now we are where we are. And so we are now trying to formulate a political structure, an economic structure that benefit our people. And so we have been going through a lot of transformation to ensure that we get to the point where our economies and our political structure would respond to our needs and not the needs of others. Our history is our history, not their history. Our political development is our political development. Therefore, whatever we develop must serve us. And we must reject the financial architecture that is to serve them. If you listen to the Prime Minister from Barbados, Mia Mottley, she has presented what is called the Bridgetown Initiative, which seeks to rupture the present financial architecture globally, which serves one set of people to the detriment of others, such as the Caribbean, Africa, and so forth. So we have to start there. What are the types of political structures and financial economic structures that we are going to put in place? Not just locally, but we're going to advocate and push for internationally so that those structures can respond to our needs. So I will let my first response to end there to say, based on our history and where we're at now, what are we going to do to make sure that our political systems and our financial economic systems respond to our specific needs as people of the Caribbean and people of Africa?
Thank you, Honorable Prime Minister. And Sherade, I think we'll just tie in very quickly to what he set the tone, he set the stage. And Nigeria, as a case study, I think we also have gone through our fair share. The structure of our economies were to produce, to feed factories in the West, from cocoa, sugar, rubber, oil and gas. But recently in Nigeria, we've seen how Nigerian entrepreneurs are basically stepping in and basically taking back this economic vehicles, basically to create a wealth for the people, create economic emancipation for the people to meet and ensure there's more wealth retained on the continent. If we take oil and gas, for example, we've seen Nigerian companies stepping into the role and buying out this international oil and gas companies. We're seeing our banking systems going to other African countries, taking and creating banking franchises across the continent. What would you say the government is doing? How has the reforms, what is the government doing deliberately, just as the Prime Minister have said, to ensure that we can catalyze wealth for our people and take back our economies for ourselves?
Yeah, I think it's on now. Okay, so thank you very much for that. I think, first of all, to say a huge congratulations to all the organizers for having put this most necessary conversation together. And a big welcome to Prime Minister and all our other visitors from different parts of the Caribbean, African, etc. So speaking to your question, I know this is Afri-Carribean and obviously African, but your question was specifically related to Nigeria, so I'll use that as permission to speak on Nigeria. So if I use our example, President Tinubu took up office on the 29th of May. But based on the work that he had done, himself and his team had done before, he had a good sense of the dislocations within our economy that were causing fiscal imbalances. So for example, the fuel subsidy and the subsidy on foreign exchange. But we're also acting as economic impediments because for those who understood or understand the Nigerian economy, we had multiple foreign exchange rates. And what that did was investors could not come into the country because they would have to sell their FX at the lower rate. And then when they needed to buy anything, they'd have to do it at the higher rate. Local owners of capital thought, well, this is not representing good returns for our investment. So we were not attracting local investment, we were not attracting foreign investment. So he undertook these reforms to, in the first instance, remove the fuel subsidies and then also to remove the FX subsidies. And that's had a huge impact in terms of attracting investment into the country, but also spurring domestic investment. So if you look, for example, at our foreign reserves, which is now at about $40 billion and had dipped to the low 30s. So in answer to your question, it really is about creating a framework, an economic framework that matches returns with the risks taken. Again, if we speak to the central bank, we had this huge dislocation where inflation rates were much higher than the returns that investors were getting. So what did a lot of local people do? Instead, they would invest in dollars, for example, rather than invest in the real sector. But by increasing interest rates, though we know that that's had implications on the real sector, but it means that we begin to return to an environment of real returns, which is what investment will always require.
I think that's really clear, and we've seen, and we'll come back to you because we saw the confidence that the market showed when Nigeria launched the inaugural diaspora bond. I think it was set for $500 million, and we saw investors putting up $900 million. It was oversubscribed by almost double. But we will come back to that so that you can just speak to how the Caribbeans, because there was a bond targeted at the diaspora, and I know a country like St. Kitts has huge diaspora population in the UK, in the US, across the Americas. So we'll speak to how St. Kitts and maybe other countries in the Caribbean can tap in a creative financing framework as a diaspora bond. But Prime Minister, we are seeing, and championed by Professor Benedict Orama of Afri-Carribean, trying to drive the financial interrelationship between Africa, leveraging Afri-Carribean as a platform, and the Caribbean. I think just a few days ago we had the groundbreaking ceremony of the Afri-Carribean Trade Center to be built in Barbados. We have a rep office in Barbados. We're beginning to finance transaction. And I must say congratulations. I understand from my colleague who heads the office in Barbados that the first transaction was actually done in your country. And I think that's very commendable, that it means you are running ahead of your peers. But Prime Minister, first is how have you been able to get first the trust of Afri-Carribean to be able to put the first deal in your country? And how do you see greater collaboration? We have the African Development Bank, we have the African Finance Corporation, we have the Trade and Development Bank in East Africa, or the Shelter Africa. How can the Caribbean tap other African development banks so that we can have a greater convening power together with Afri-Carribean to do more in the Caribbean?
Thank you very much. Let me say and recap on what you said, that St. Kitts and Nevis was the first to sign an MOU supported by the Afri-Carribean Bank in the whole of the Caribbean. I got elected on... So I got elected on August 5th, 2022. President Orama, professor, and his team from Afri-Carribean Bank came to Barbados in September of 2022. It was my first trip outside of St. Kitts and Nevis, and it was for my first bilateral, I would say, interaction as Prime Minister. I really took that trip because I wanted to meet Professor Orama. The story was a very excellent story, a story that was very intriguing, and I wanted to know, the Afri-Carribean Bank, President Orama, why is he now coming to the Caribbean? So I went to the meeting and I listened to him, because I think the previous panelists spoke about something. They spoke about trust. Trust is very important when embarking on anything that has to do with finance, at a personal business level, much more at a country level. And so when President Orama came in, I went to Barbados and I listened to him carefully. I think he was excellent in the way that he presented and how he sold the story. He wrapped it in history, and in addition to that, he said words without tangible benefits would go nowhere. That's almost akin to a Bible verse that I learned when I was young. And after that, there was a private meeting set up between the leaders and President Orama. And from what I can remember, I may have been the only leader who sat in that private meeting with President at that time. And I think Of course, a new person come in, leaders will have, need time to really appreciate what this new person would be coming with. But I decided to go and listen to him. In talking to him more privately, I think I got to know his spirit and understand him more and say, okay, this is somebody maybe I can trust, meeting him. Just by interaction, listening to him, shaking hands, looking into his eyes. Those things that you do to know if you should at least start to trust this person. And all the positive signs were there. And then he asked that we sign an MOU, a non-binding MOU, so that he can say to his board that the Caribbean countries are serious. And that was the first MOU that I signed as Prime Minister. Again, because I am building the trust. And then President Orama came back again when we were in Bahamas for another event. And there he and I met again to strengthen the relationship even more. And then I invited him to St. Kitts. And he came to St. Kitts and he sat in my cabinet room and we had an excellent conversation. The very painting that I have behind of me in my cabinet room is a painting from President Orama. President Orama, I say all of that to show that it takes the effort. One has to come on a mission and one has to understand, one has to be able to build that trust, and one has to be able to set a clear path as to how the relationship will develop. But again, it must also have tangible benefits, what you're talking about. And so just like we did that with Afri-Carribean Bank, we can also do that with the other banks, because I think the other banks can see that the relationship between Afri-Carribean Bank and the Caribbean, and St. Kitts and Nevis specifically, has been very productive and has been beneficial to both entities, the Caribbean as a whole and the Afri-Carribean Bank as a bank. And I think the other banks can embark as a result of this great example that has been set.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. So clearly, you underscored the role of trust, mutual collaboration, and tangible benefits. And clearly, I'm sure yourself and your delegation, after this mission to Nigeria, we're hoping very much, and with the GM of Aquarian, that in another year, we should be able to sign and tangible agreements, yes. Deals being closed, which will basically give fruits to this visit to Nigeria. As I was trying to say earlier, we saw Nigeria launch the diaspora bond, basically to tap liquidity from Nigerians in the diaspora in a first formal method, and it was oversubscribed in the first instance, and it was really commendable and gave confidence to the process. And I believe this is something that the Caribbean can do as they try to deepen access to finance, access to liquidity. What tips, what nuggets would you have to share for the Prime Minister, his delegation, around this diaspora bond that can help the CARICOM in doing something similar to tap liquidity from abroad?
Okay, now. So, in terms of the diaspora bond, as we know, all countries such as ours have citizens out in the diaspora who are looking for investment opportunities back home. And certainly in our part of the world, we have people in the diaspora who have concerns that sometimes they send funding back home for various ventures and they don't get the kind of returns they want. So that was one angle. The second is also having significant population out in the diaspora who want to partner with government, especially when they see government taking the right steps. So in terms of linking to the earlier conversations on the reforms and trust, that bond program was only possible after we'd undertaken the necessary reforms. Had we done it, say 18 months, or should I say, had the previous government done it before those key reforms, I'm not sure it really would have gained the kind of traction it did. And I think as evidence of that point is, in December last year, we also launched a Eurobond. And on that one, the target was, I think it was about $2.25 billion. And we got to the UK, we sat with the advisors the day before, and there was a question of, do we do a roadshow or don't we do a roadshow? And the view that was given was that over a period of time, we had been engaging with investors. They had a good sense of where we're at, where we were with the reforms, to position us not to have to do a roadshow for that Eurobond. And true to form, we opened the Eurobond, and the initial demand was about $9.9 billion. So again, hugely oversubscribed. So I say that to say the importance of laying the ground by putting in the kind of economic framework that will build trust with those in the diaspora, and then also engaging with the investors, including the diaspora investors. So with all these different global events, World Bank, IMF spring meetings, UNGA, etc., there have been different engagements with Nigerians in the diaspora to ensure that when it came to a bond such as that, it could be successful, but also remembering the domestic investors. So there was a diaspora bond. It was open to investors in the country and also partnering with the financial institutions in the country, because they too will help to bring in the investment.
Thank you, Sir Ade. And Prime Minister, just to, from your perspective, sitting as Prime Minister, political head, economic head, how have you supported the financial institutions in St. Kitts and Nevis, and how do you see the CARICOM doing better in terms of collaborating with other I know that we have the RBCs, the big banks from Canada, and the US banks, but how do you see the CARICOM creating a better framework to tap in African financial institutions who, for example, want to set up shop in the CARICOM? Access Bank, for example, I understand, are trying to set up shop in Barbados. But from your role as a political head and an economic head, how do you see this working?
Right, thank you very much. I think I like the idea that was presented before I get to the question on the diaspora bonds. We are launching our own bonds, and listening to her, it sparked an idea.
Beautiful.
And I would like to say
Beautiful.
This would help us tremendously.
Beautiful.
So when I'm on the road meeting my diaspora, I will also promote my bond. Thanks for that idea. Yes, so in St. Kitts and Nevis, we do have banks that are from outside St. Kitts and Nevis. But the largest bank in St. Kitts and Nevis is our own indigenous bank. Let me say, because again, the statement was made today, nobody is coming to save us. We have to save ourselves. In the 1970s, after England was about to leave St. Kitts and Nevis, the people were very poor, uneducated, just like the story here in Nigeria, of course. And so the then administration, we had a semi-independent system, political system, took the decision to start an indigenous bank. The bank was called the Penny Bank. For those of us who remember back then, when they used to have the pounds and so forth, they had what you call the penny. These are the very cents. So the majority of people worked in the sugar industry for very little. And so the foreign banks would not take their money because they consider their money to be too small and negligible for them to take their money and put in their banks. In addition to that, there was a significant amount of racism where the majority black people did not have the opportunity to access finance and access banks to bank or even to borrow. And so that, of course, would lead to further underdevelopment. But then there was a gentleman who had studied in England, and he returned to St. Kitts and Nevis, and together they formed what was called the Penny Bank. The objective was, we will take your pennies. And from the 1970s to now, that bank grew larger than all of the foreign banks in St. Kitts and Nevis. And today it is still the largest. Not only that, it became the largest indigenous bank in the whole OECS and one of the largest in the whole of the Caribbean, even though we were the smallest country. That is why I say size does not define you at all. And that says to us that we did not need to solely depend on them, that we could have done it ourselves, and we did it ourselves, and we lift ourselves up tremendously out of poverty. I gave that backdrop to say that we have experience in banking as a people. We understand the importance of banking. And so that is why I was open to welcome the Afri-Carribean Bank. And we are open to welcoming any other bank from the continent. Let me say that our laws are such that will facilitate very easily banks from across the continent to come into St. Kitts and Nevis to set up. I will not speak to all of the specifics, but just to say that we facilitate. We have relationships with other banks, for example, that we have instituted as well. And the Afri-Carribean Bank, I went to Parliament as the Minister of Finance, and I lead the debate on incorporating the Afri-Carribean Bank as a bank in St. Kitts and Nevis, and that only took us about 2 hours. So that is an example to say to the other banks that St. Kitts and Nevis, we are open for business, and especially business from our African brothers and sisters right here on the continent.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister, and very well said. I think this panel has done a great job in basically detailing the role of finance and how critical it is to ensuring that we can create wealth for our people, drive economic emancipation. Prime Minister, one word that you have not held back is trust. The role of trust, the role of knowing who your partner is. And that's why, of course, Afri-Carribean could do the first transaction in the CARICOM in St. Kitts. And so Yade has also spoken around reforms, how it's critical for government to create reforms so that you can engender trust, going back to your trust again, so that when people are in the diaspora, they can trust you enough to invest back home in your bond and raise liquidity that can help develop the country. As we close the panel, and so I'll like you so that the Prime Minister can have the last word. So what's the outlook for financing? We've seen all that is going on in the world. There's a lot of nationalism. We're seeing the US wealth for US people, the US aid being cut. What's the outlook for Africa? And then maybe Prime Minister, you can speak to the outlook for the CARICOM.
I think the truth is it's very uncertain. I think if I'm to put one word to it, it is uncertain. And on that basis, there has the way one plans has to be different. Where you are, it certainly moves us more towards the whole concept of domestic resource mobilization, making sure that you're not dependent on funding from external parties, because we have, in the last few months, seen what we thought was unthinkable happen. And so it certainly, for me, it begs the question, what other sacred cows will be slayed over the coming weeks and months? So it moves us all towards greater precision with our planning, greater cooperation amongst like-minded partners, not just always looking to Big Brother. I think it's not just that they're saying nobody's coming to help us. I think the message is more categoric now, which is rise up yourselves. But we know that some other developed worlds didn't rise up individually. They rose up by partnering with others. So equally, it's us recognizing that we are going to have to, who are the natural partners? Clearly from this conference, we've already identified who the natural partners are, and begin to work together to ensure that together we rise up. Thank you.
Thank you. Prime Minister?
One of the reasons why I'm here today at this auspicious occasion, and we decided to come, it is because If we did not learn the lessons previously, I hope we have learned them now. It is important that we forge South-South partnerships. It's important that we seek different pathways for our economic and financial stability. The world's present uncertainty should be a lesson to all of us. And as my fellow panelists say, let us not look to big brother and big sister or whoever to save us. Let us save ourselves. So that is a message I take from her very strongly.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, Prime Minister, you still have one more word?
Just to answer your question across CARICOM, we were expecting to grow this year. Of course, now it is uncertain. We have heard certain pronouncements within the coming from, for example, the United States of America, which we know will hit the Caribbean harshly in terms of the tariffs, in terms of what is expected to be placed on Chinese containers and so forth, because a lot of it go to Florida before it comes down into the Caribbean. And so we are having discussion. If those tariffs were to hit without a carve-out for the Caribbean, I can say that it would be devastating. And so we have to quickly look for different trade routes so that we can make sure that our economy can withstand whatever may come. And so we are pushing as hard as possible to establish those different alternatives while seeking to dialogue to see what can be a better outcome for all involved. That is a strong lesson, a serious lesson for all of us. When it comes to the USAID, as was mentioned, USAID was doing minimal stuff for us, so we weren't hit as badly because of USAID. But when you come to trade and shipment and logistics, and there will be tariffs on those things would affect us severely. So I want us to understand that, and we'll see where the story goes in 1 or 2 months. However, CARICOM has met, and we are developing plans and strategies to protect the region as much and as far as possible. So I would like to say, as I wrap up, to thank all of you for your participation and for being here, and to thank my fellow panelists. I want to thank you. If I did not leave with anything, I have left with an idea. Okay. So I will be on the road selling the bonds to my diaspora, because our diaspora is a larger population than the inhabitants in the country itself, and they can afford, a great deal of them can afford this. And to say lastly, let us continue to work to make sure that the relationship and the reconnection between Africa and Caribbean is not just only about history and emotions and feelings. These things are very important. Do not put them secondary. But as President Orama from the Afri-Carribean said, there must also be tangible benefits. Let's invest in each other. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. Can we have a resounding round of applause for him? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please, let's make that applause for them a bit louder than that. May I invite our convener to please join them over here for a photograph. This is for our panel and for our archives, the convener, and of course, the premier of Nevis. Thank you very much. I'll let you know that every day it is indeed a learning curve, an opportunity to learn. This event has presented us an opportunity to learn, relearn, and unlearn. And according to George Keefe, where and how I was born is not important. What should be of utmost importance is what I have done with where I have been. I must be honest with you, history and posterity will be very kind to the convener of this program, as well as the leader of St. Kitts and Nevis for this very wonderful summit. If you intend to make that a clap for them, can we make that a clap for them, please? Thank you very much. Congratulations. We'll be breaking out for lunch, and we're expected to reconvene in 40 minutes. Lunch is served at both Buka Restaurant and Zuma Grill Restaurant, respectively. But before then, let me quickly recognize the presence of the Honorable Commissioner Niger State, Honorable Commissioner, Honorable Aminu Suleiman Takuma, is the Honorable Commissioner of Niger State for Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment and Private Sector Development, MENA, Niger State. Would like to welcome you. So lunch is served at Buka Restaurant and Zuma Grill. Please check your meal tickets to be sure of where to go to for lunch.